Ma'am, where'd you get them?
The iPads? They're ours.
I'll need to see the receipts.
Having lunch. My grandchildren and I are customers here.
I did not ask if you were customers. I asked where those tablets came from. Kids like that do not have iPads. You know what I mean? And you're being loud, disruptive. This is not your place.
If you come across this video, comment telling me where you're watching from. The officer wasn't there yet, but the tension that would come from him was already set up by what sat on the table. Two children waited quietly, eyes moving between the entrance and the glowing screens in front of them. The tablets lay flat, cases scuffed from regular use, volume low enough that no one nearby could hear anything. One child tapped through a game. The other watched a short video, thumb hovering, pausing when the audio crept up. They weren't loud. They weren't running around. They weren't drawing attention to themselves. Davis Evelyn sat with them, posture straight, without trying to make a point of it. She wasn't monitoring every movement, but she was aware of everything. Years of service had trained that into her. Awareness without tension. Presence without display. The kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly where you are and what you're responsible for. She glanced at the tablets, then at the children. They were doing what kids do when they're told to wait. Nothing more. Nothing suspicious. Nothing worth noticing. Orders were still being prepared. The kids had already asked once how much longer it would take. She told them a few minutes and meant it. There was no impatience in her voice, no edge, just information. Around them, people came and went. Some ate quickly. Others checked phones. A family at another table passed a phone back and forth to look at pictures. No one cared. No one needed to. The tablets stayed where they were. One of the kids shifted in their seat and pulled the tablet closer, instinctively protective in the way children are with things they use every day. Davis noticed but didn't comment. She didn't believe in making kids self-conscious for no reason. There was no rule against it. There was no sign saying devices weren't allowed. They weren't bothering anyone. She took a sip from her cup and scanned the room the way she always did, slowly, without urgency. Not because she felt unsafe, but because awareness was a habit she never dropped. Her eyes moved past the counter, the door, the line forming behind it. That's when she saw the uniform enter. She didn't react. Not outwardly. A police officer walking into a restaurant wasn't unusual. It happened all the time. Sometimes they ordered food. Sometimes they used the restroom. Sometimes they just stood near the counter and waited. But she noticed how his attention shifted almost immediately. He didn't look at the menu for long. His eyes moved across the room, paused briefly on one group, then another. When his gaze reached their table, it stopped. Not a glance, a hold. Davis felt it before she fully processed it. That familiar tightening behind the eyes. Not fear, recognition. The moment when observation turns into judgment. She didn't move. She didn't adjust her posture or pull the tablets closer or signal the kids to do anything differently. She refused to participate in anticipation. The officer took a step farther inside. The children didn't notice him at first. They were focused on their screens, waiting for their food. One of them smiled at something on the tablet, then looked up at Davis as if to share it. She returned the smile, small but present. The officer stopped a few feet away. "Those yours?" The question came without greeting. No introduction. No explanation. Just the words directed at the table, his chin lifting slightly toward the tablets. The kids froze. Not dramatically, just enough to notice the shift. Davis answered before they could. Her voice was even, calm, controlled. "Yes." The officer didn't respond right away. He looked down at the tablets, then back at the kids. "Where'd you get them?" There it was, the assumption wrapped in a question. Davis felt the line cross, clean and unmistakable. She kept her tone neutral. "They belong to the children." He nodded once, slow, as if processing, then asked again, "Who bought them?" The kids looked at Davis now, not scared, but uncertain. This wasn't a teacher. This wasn't a store employee. This was someone they'd been taught to answer carefully. "I did," Davis said. "Is there a problem?" The officer exhaled through his nose. He didn't answer the question. "We've had reports of stolen devices in the area." Davis knew that phrasing, vague enough to justify anything. specific enough to sound official. From this location, she asked. He didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He just kept looking at the tablets. The kids' hands hovered over the screens, unsure whether to keep playing or set them down. One of them slowly placed their tablet flat on the table, palms resting on either side, as if trying to show compliance without being told to. Davis noticed and felt something tighten in her chest. Not panic, anger held in check. There's been no announcement, she said. No one's approached us. If there's an issue, I'm happy to hear it. The officer shifted his weight. Mind if I take a look? At what? She asked. The tablets. They're not evidence of anything, she said, and the children aren't suspects. That was the moment the air changed. Not dramatically, not loudly, but enough that the people closest to them stopped talking, enough that someone at table over-angled their phones slightly, not recording yet, but ready. The officer's voice tightened. I just need to verify. Verify what? Davis asked. There's no report involving us. He didn't answer that either. Instead, he repeated himself, louder this time. Mind if I take a look? Davis leaned back slightly and folded her hands together on the table, keeping them visible. A deliberate choice. I do mind, she said, because you haven't given me a lawful reason. The kids sat still, too still. They were watching everything now, not the tablets, the adults. The officer glanced around, registering the attention. He straightened his shoulders. Ma'am, I'm asking you to cooperate. I am cooperating, Davis said. I'm asking you to explain. For a brief second, something flickered across his face. Uncertainty, maybe, or annoyance. It passed quickly. Just doing my job, he said. Davis held his gaze. So am I, she replied. The tablets remained on the table, untouched. The food was still waiting to be called. And what had started as children passing time had already turned into something else, entirely something that would not stay contained at that table near the window. Officer Walker didn't announce himself when he stepped farther into the room. He didn't need to. The uniform did the work for him. Conversations dipped without anyone realizing why. People noticed without wanting to stare. Authority has a way of changing the temperature of a place even before it speaks. He stopped a few feet from the table and stood there longer than necessary. Not close enough to be polite, not far enough to ignore, close enough to make it clear he was staying. Davis didn't fill the silence. She had learned long ago that silence often pressured the person who didn't expect resistance. Walker shifted first. You understand why I'm asking, he said. I understand you're asking, she replied. I don't understand why. He glanced again at the tablets, then at the kids. His eyes lingered a second too long, the way people do when they've already decided something and are looking for confirmation. There have been issues, he said. Groups coming in with stolen electronics. Today? Davis asked. Recently. In this restaurant. He pressed his lips together. In the area. Davis nodded once, slow. Then, this table isn't part of that. Walker's jaw tightened. I haven't finished. The kids stayed quiet. One of them looked down at their hands. The other stared straight ahead, eyes fixed on nothing. Davis noticed both reactions and felt the familiar weight settle in her chest. This was the part that stayed with children long after adults moved on. Walker adjusted his belt and straightened, subtly reminding everyone who he was supposed to be in that moment. Let me see the devices, he said, just real quick. No, Davis replied. The word wasn't loud. It wasn't sharp. It was firm, the way commands sound when they don't need decoration. He blinked, surprised. Ma'am, you don't have consent, she said, and you don't have cause. His voice hardened. I'm not accusing anyone. You are, she said. You just haven't said the word. Walker took half a step closer. Not enough to be threatening. Enough to be felt. Do you know how this looks? He asked. Davis held his gaze. I know exactly how it looks. Someone nearby cleared their throat. A chair scraped softly. The room had shifted into observation mode now. Not alarmed. Curious. Alert. Walker glanced around again, registering the attention more clearly this time. His shoulders squared. Last chance to cooperate, he said. Davis leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice without softening it. Officer, she said, You walked up to a table of children and accused them of theft without evidence. You haven't identified a complainant. You haven't named a report. And you're continuing to question minors without cause. That's not cooperation. That's overreach. He stared at her, clearly not expecting that level of response. Not here. Not from her. Are you a lawyer? He asked. No, she said. I'm their legal guardian. That wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough. And you're interfering, he said. I'm protecting children, she replied. That's my job. Walker inhaled slowly, visibly recalibrating. He looked at the tablets again, as if hoping one of them would betray the situation by lighting up with a stolen property alert. Nothing happened. You got receipts, he asked, for our personal property? Davis said, No, that's suspicious, he said. She shook her head. That's normal. He shifted his stance again. I can detain the devices. You can't, she said, and you know it. The words landed harder than she intended, not because of volume, but because of certainty. Walker hesitated, just a fraction, but it was there. Why don't you tell me your name? He said. You approached us, she replied. You first. Officer Thomas Walker, he said, clipped. She nodded. Thank you. I'll remember that. He frowned. Is that a threat? No, she said. It's documentation. That word did it. Walker's hand moved to the small camera on his chest, tapping it once as if to remind himself and her that everything was being recorded. For the record, he said, I'm conducting a lawful inquiry. For the record, Davis replied, You still haven't explained what law you're relying on. The kids shifted again. One whispered, Are we in trouble? Davis turned to them immediately, her voice softening without losing control. No, she said. You haven't done anything wrong. Walker watched the exchange, irritation creeping into his expression. Ma'am, he said, I'm going to need you to step away from the table. No, she said again. His eyes narrowed. You're refusing a lawful order. I'm refusing an unlawful one, she said. There was a beat of silence that stretched longer than it should have. Long enough for someone to lift a phone fully now. Long enough for another person to whisper, What's going on? Walker glanced at the phone, then back at Davis. He lowered his voice. You're making this harder than it needs to be. You made it hard when you stopped here, she said. He exhaled sharply. Look, if there's nothing to hide, then there's nothing to investigate, she cut in. The words were simple, clear, unavoidable. Walker straightened again, choosing his next move carefully. He wasn't used to being challenged like this in public. Not without someone raising their voice or backing down. Davis did neither. Are these your kids? He asked. They're under my legal care, she said. He nodded. Then you're responsible for them. Yes, she said, which is why I'm not allowing this. Walker looked around the room one more time. The attention was undeniable now. Phones were up. People weren't pretending anymore. He lowered his voice again. You don't want this to escalate. Davis met his eyes. Neither do you. Another pause. Longer this time. Walker's radio crackled softly. He touched it, but didn't respond. What's your full name? He asked her. Davis Evelyn. He repeated it under his breath, committing it to memory. You got ID? I do, she said. And I'll provide it when you give me a lawful reason. His jaw flexed. You're being difficult. She didn't react. I'm being precise. The kid's food number was called. Loud, cheerful, completely out of sync with what was happening. No one moved to get it. Walker noticed. You gonna let their food get cold? He asked. Davis didn't look away from him. That's not your concern. The officer stood there, trapped between backing down and doubling down. Either choice would be seen. Either choice would be recorded. He glanced again at the tablets. Still nothing. No alarms. No alerts. Just ordinary devices on a table. Stay right here, he said finally. Davis nodded once. We weren't going anywhere. Walker turned and took a few steps away, pulling his radio closer as he spoke quietly into it. Davis didn't listen to the words. She watched his body language instead, the tension in his shoulders, the way he paced just enough to show agitation without admitting it. The kids leaned closer to her. Are we okay? One whispered. She placed a hand flat on the table, steady. We are, she said. Just stay with me. Walker turned back around, expression reset into something more official. I'm going to verify a few things, he said. Sit tight. Davis nodded again. We will. As he walked away, the room didn't relax. If anything, it leaned in. People murmured quietly now. Phone stayed raised. Authority had walked in uninvited. And for the first time, it was being questioned out loud. Where did you get those? The question landed flat, but heavy, the kind that doesn't ask for information, so much as confirmation of a suspicion already formed. Officer Walker said it while looking past Davis, straight at the tablets, as if the answer might rise off the screen and confess on its own. The kids didn't respond right away. They looked at Davis first, instinctively. She nodded once, a small signal meant to steady them. They're ours, one of them said, quietly. Walker tilted his head. How do you mean? They belong to us, the child repeated, voice careful now. Walker didn't acknowledge the answer. He crouched slightly, lowering himself closer to eye level, but the gesture didn't soften anything. Who bought them, he asked. Davis stepped in before the kids could feel pressured to fill the silence. I did, she said. What's the issue? Walker stood back up and looked at her for the first time like she was part of the problem, not just background. We've had reports of stolen iPads, he said. Groups of kids bringing them into places like this. Reports from where? Davis asked. Nearby, he said. Today, she asked. Recently. The word hung there, loose enough to stretch across anything he needed it to cover. Davis didn't raise her voice. Is there a report tied to this location? Walker didn't answer. He pointed at the nearest tablet instead. That one. Let me see it. No, Davis said. The refusal was calm, immediate, not reactive. Walker blinked. I'm just checking. You're accusing, she replied, and you haven't said why. He straightened again, posture tightening. I asked you a question. And I answered it, she said, several times. The kids sat very still now. One had folded their hands together, fingers pressed tight. The other rested their palms flat on the table, as if afraid any movement might be misread. Walker noticed. Why are they nervous? Because an armed stranger is questioning them, Davis said. In public. His jaw tightened. I'm a police officer. I know, she said. Then you know I have a job to do. So do I. Walker's eyes flicked briefly to the people nearby. Someone had stopped eating. Someone else had angled their phone, just enough that it was obvious what they were doing without being obvious about it. He lowered his voice. This doesn't need to be a thing. It already is, Davis said. He looked back at the tablets. You got serial numbers? She shook her head. No. Receipts? No. That's not normal, he said. It is, she replied. Most people don't carry paperwork for personal electronics. Walker leaned one hand on the table, not touching anything, but close enough to make his presence felt. Then, help me understand why kids this young have devices like this, he said. Davis felt the shift. The question had moved from ownership to judgment. Because their guardian bought them, she said, just like millions of other families. He watched her closely. What do you do for work? She paused, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she understood the trap embedded in the question. That's not relevant, she said. He smiled slightly without warmth. It helps me understand. It helps you justify, she said. Walker straightened again. You're being evasive. No, she said. I'm setting boundaries. The kids' food sat untouched a few feet away, cold and waiting. No one moved to get it. The moment had narrowed to this exchange, this question that wouldn't let go. Let me be clear, Walker said. If those devices are stolen, that's a crime. And if they're not, Davis said, this is harassment. He exhaled sharply. You're escalating. You approached us, she said. You escalated when you stayed. Walker shook his head slightly, as if disappointed. You could make this easy. Davis met his eyes. Easy isn't the same as right. One of the kids whispered, barely audible, we didn't steal anything. Walker turned to them. I didn't say you did. But you keep asking, the child said. The words were simple, honest. They landed harder than any argument. Walker hesitated, just long enough for it to register. I need you to understand, he said, voice tightening again, that if I walk away and these turn out to be stolen, you'll still have no evidence they were, Davis finished. Speculation doesn't change that. Walker's hand brushed the camera on his chest again, reflex now. For the record, he said, I'm investigating a potential theft. For the record, Davis replied, you've identified no victim, no report, and no probable cause. A low murmur moved through the room. Someone whispered, this is ridiculous. Walker heard it. His cheeks flushed. You're not going to tell me where they came from? He asked again. I already did, Davis said. You just didn't like the answer. Another pause, the kind that stretches because both sides are waiting for the other to blink. Walker straightened fully, voice shifting into something more formal. All right, he said, then I'm going to need you to provide identification. For what reason? Davis asked. To document the encounter. You initiated it, she said. You document yourself. That's not how this works. It is when there's no cause, she said. He stared at her, measuring. The crowd, the phones, the children watching every movement. Ma'am, he said slowly, you're making yourself part of this. I already was, she said, the moment you spoke to my kids. Walker looked down at the tablets one more time, as if hoping they would finally give him something solid. They didn't. Just dark screens now, powered down, waiting. Stay seated, he said. We are, Davis replied. He turned away again, irritation visible now, no longer fully contained. As he walked off to radio, the question he'd asked stayed hanging in the air, unanswered only because it never deserved an answer in the first place. Where did you get those? It wasn't a question anymore. It was an accusation looking for permission. Walker came back without answers and without apology. He didn't announce what he'd found because there was nothing to announce. No call confirming a theft. No store manager pointing anyone out. No report tied to that location, that time, or those kids. He stood near the table, anyway. I'm still looking into it, he said. Davis didn't respond right away. She watched him, noting the change in his posture. Less certainty now. More stiffness. The kind that comes when someone realizes they're standing on nothing but refuses to move. Looking into what? She asked. Potential stolen property. She nodded once. From who? Walker didn't answer. The kids stayed quiet. One of them picked at a corner of a napkin, tearing it slowly, eyes down. The other sat straight, hands folded, trying not to do anything that could be read the wrong way. Davis felt the weight of that effort and spoke before Walker could aim another question at them. You've checked, she said. There's no report. He shifted his feet. That doesn't mean nothing happened. It means you don't have a basis, she said. Walker looked past her, scanning the room again, as if hoping someone would step forward and justify him staying. No one did. A few people had their phones fully up now. No hiding it. I'm allowed to investigate, he said. You are, Davis agreed. You're not allowed to linger without cause. His eyes narrowed. You don't get to tell me how to do my job. I do when your job affects children, she said. And you can't articulate why you're here. Walker's jaw clenched. He looked down at the tablets again, then at the kids. You sure those weren't taken from somewhere else? He asked. The question hit harder because of how casually he said it. One of the kids looked up, eyes wide. No. Walker leaned slightly closer. You sure? Davis stood up. Not abruptly, not aggressively, just enough to put her between him and the children. That's enough, she said. The movement drew immediate attention. Chairs shifted. Someone muttered, come on. Walker straightened too, meeting her eye level now. You need to sit down, he said. No, she replied. You need to step back. You're obstructing, he said. I'm setting a boundary, she said. You don't have a report. You don't have evidence. You don't have consent. And you're continuing to question minors. He laughed once, sharp and humorless. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true, she said. Walker glanced at his radio again, then away. I'm not leaving until I'm satisfied. With what? Davis asked. You've checked. There's nothing. That's your opinion. It's the facts, she said. He shifted again, frustration visible now. You don't understand how often people lie. And you don't understand how often people assume, she said. The room felt tight, like everyone was holding the same breath. The kids' food still sat untouched. One of them glanced toward it, then back at Davis, silently asking if it was okay. "Stay where you are," Walker said, quickly noticing Davis didn't look away from him. "They can eat." "No," he said. "Not yet." "That's not your call," she said. Walker's face flushed. "You're pushing this. You're prolonging it," she said. "For no reason." He opened his mouth, then closed it. Whatever he'd expected to happen by now hadn't. No confession. No nervous slip. No outside validation. Instead, there were witnesses, cameras, and a clear record of him staying without cause. "Let me see your ID," he said again. "For what?" Davis asked. "Because I'm asking." "That's not a reason," she said. He raised his voice slightly. "Ma'am." "No," she said, matching his firmness without raising hers. "You don't get louder when you run out of justification." That landed. Someone near the counter let out a quiet "wow." Walker heard it. He took a step back, then another, as if trying to reset the scene. "I'm trying to resolve this," he said. "Then resolve it," Davis said. "Walk away." He shook his head. "I can't just ignore it." "You already should have," she said. Another pause. Longer now. Heavy. Walker looked at the kids again. They didn't look guilty. They looked tired. "Are you aware," he asked Davis slowly, "that refusing to comply can have consequences?" "Yes," she said, "and so can violating people's rights." The words hung there, clean and sharp. Walker pressed his lips together. He glanced once more at the phones around the room, at the people watching him watch them. "This didn't need to go like this," he said. "You're right," Davis replied. "It didn't." He stood there for a moment longer, clearly weighing whether to double down or retreat. Whatever decision he made would be seen, would be remembered. Finally, he stepped back another pace. "I'm going to finish documenting," he said. "Don't leave." Davis nodded. "We weren't planning to." As he walked away again, slower this time, the tension didn't break. It settled. Everyone understood what was happening now. There was no report, no evidence, no exit, and the longer he stayed, the clearer that became. By the time Walker stopped pretending he was busy with his radio, everyone in the room was watching. No one was subtle about it anymore. Phones were fully up now, not angled, not hidden. One woman near the counter held hers chest high, screen pointed straight at the table. A man by the drink station leaned back, arms crossed, eyes fixed on Walker. Conversations had dropped to whispers, then stopped altogether. Walker felt it. He pretended not to, but his movements changed. Slower, more deliberate. He adjusted his belt again, straightened his shoulders, scanned the room like he was trying to regain control of something that had already slipped. Davis stayed where she was, standing between him and the kids. She didn't turn to acknowledge the cameras. She didn't signal to anyone. Her focus stayed exactly where it needed to be. Walker cleared his throat. "I'm going to need everyone to relax," he said, projecting his voice now. No one responded. The silence wasn't hostile. It was attentive, the kind that makes every word matter more. He looked at Davis. "You're causing a scene." She didn't raise her voice. "You brought one." A few people nodded. Someone muttered, "She's right." Walker heard it. His eyes flicked toward the sound, then back. "I asked you not to leave," he said. "We haven't moved," Davis replied. He shifted his weight. "I also asked you for identification." "And I asked you for cause," she said. The kids sat frozen again, shoulders tight. One of them whispered, "Why are they filming?" Davis answered without looking away from Walker. "Because people want to see what happens when someone won't stop." Walker's jaw tightened. "You think this looks good for you?" She met his eyes. "I think it looks accurate." That stung. He could feel it. Accuracy was the enemy now. He glanced at the phones again, then back at the kids. His voice dropped, but the edge remained. "You understand," he said, "that if I suspect a crime—" "You need facts," Davis said, "not feelings." A few quiet reactions rippled through the room. Not cheers, not claps, just that low, collective sound people make when something lands. Walker straightened, clearly irritated. "I'm not here to debate." "Then stop asking questions you don't want answers to," she said. He turned slightly, pacing 2 steps away, then back again, like he was trying to find a position that worked better on camera. He didn't look at the kids this time. He looked at Davis. "Are you refusing to cooperate?" he asked. "I've cooperated the entire time," she said. "I've answered you. I've stayed. I've protected the children. What I won't do is consent to harassment." The word hung there. Harassment. Someone near the door said it out loud, almost under their breath. "This is harassment." Walker snapped his head toward them. "Sir, mind your business." The man didn't respond, just kept filming. Walker exhaled hard through his nose and turned back to Davis. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," he said. She shook her head. "You're the one keeping it alive." He opened his mouth, then stopped. He looked around again. The entire room was locked in now. There was no casual audience left. Everyone had chosen a side, even if they hadn't said it out loud. Walker's radio crackled again. He listened, nodded once, then turned it down. "All right," he said, voice clipped. "Here's what's going to happen." Davis waited. "I'm going to document this encounter," he continued, "and then we'll see where it goes." "We already see where it's going," she said. "You're standing here without cause." He pointed at the tablets again. "Those devices are the cause." "They're not," she said. "They're objects you decided to suspect." One of the kids finally spoke up, voice small but steady. "Can we eat now?" The question cut through everything. Walker looked at the child, then at the food still waiting. "Not yet," he said automatically. Davis turned slightly, placing a hand on the table near the kids. "Yes," she said. "You can eat." Walker stepped forward. "I said not yet." She met him halfway with her eyes. "You don't control that." The tension spiked. Phones shifted closer. Someone gasped quietly. Walker hesitated. The room watched him decide. He took a step back. "Fine," he said, "but don't touch the tablets." Davis didn't argue. The kids reached for their food instead, hands shaking just slightly. She noticed and felt the familiar burn in her chest. This was the part that stayed with them, the part no report ever captured. As they ate, Walker stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching. Not investigating. Waiting. Hoping for something, anything, to justify what he'd already done. It didn't come. A woman near the counter shook her head slowly. Another person whispered, "This is messed up." Walker heard that too. "You recording?" he asked one man. "Yes," the man said. "Why?" Walker looked away. Minutes passed. Long, uncomfortable minutes. The kind that stretch when no one knows how to end what shouldn't have started. Davis stayed calm. She didn't gloat. She didn't lecture. She simply existed in the space he was trying to dominate, refusing to shrink. Finally, Walker shifted again, restless. "You know," he said, almost to himself, "this would have been easier if you'd just shown ID." Davis didn't look at him. "It would have been easier if you'd walked past our table." That did it. Walker looked at her sharply, then around the room one last time. The phones, the faces, the silence. He nodded once, stiff. "I'm done here." No one cheered. No one spoke. The room just breathed again. Walker turned and walked toward the door, shoulders tight, steps quick. As he left, the phone stayed up a moment longer, making sure it was real. Only when the door closed did the tension finally break. The kids looked up at Davis. "Is he gone?" one asked. "Yes," she said. "He's gone." But everyone in that room knew the story wasn't. The email came back faster than Davis expected, not with answers, but with a case number and a sentence that said the complaint had been received. That was enough to shift things from opinion to record, and she felt it immediately. Authority doesn't like being pinned to paper. 2 days later, a voicemail followed. Professional. Careful. Internal Affairs wanted to clarify a few points. Davis called back on her lunch break, put the phone on speaker, and took notes while she talked. They asked what time the officer arrived. She gave it. They asked how long he stayed after admitting there was no report. She gave that too. They asked if the children were searched. She said no, but only because she stopped it. There was a pause after that, the kind that happens when policy collides with behavior. Later that afternoon, a link arrived to upload any recordings. Davis sent the full clip, unedited. She didn't add commentary. Documentation speaks better without tone. Walker filed his own report that same day. She got a copy through a records request. It was short, vague, heavy on words like suspicious and concerned citizen. No names, no times, no explanation for why he stayed. She read it twice, then once more slowly. Suspicious of what exactly? The kids' tablets were mentioned, not the brand, not the condition, just that they were high-value electronics. That phrase did a lot of work without saying anything real. Davis forwarded the report to the investigator with a single line, "Please note discrepancies with body camera footage." The reply came the next morning, acknowledged. A week passed, then another. Walker stayed on duty. No apology came, no call, but the silence felt different now, tighter. At a community meeting later that month, someone brought it up during the public comment period. A man Davis didn't know stood up and said he'd been in the place that day, said he'd recorded part of it too, said he'd already submitted it when he saw the complaint notice posted online. Walker was in the room. He didn't look at Davis, but his jaw tightened when the man spoke. The department rep thanked the speaker and moved on. Policy required that, but policy also required follow-up, and that was already in motion. 2 days after the meeting, Davis got another call. This one was shorter. "We've reviewed the footage," the investigator said. "We have concerns." Concerns wasn't a verdict. It was a door. What kind? Davis asked. Procedural, they said, and judgment-related. She didn't press. She knew better than to fill silence with hope. Walker's narrative didn't hold up once it was laid against timestamps. The moment he claimed the concern escalated was after he'd already been told there was no report. The moment he said the kids were evasive lined up with footage of them answering calmly. The body cam caught his tone shifting before anything else changed. Bias doesn't announce itself. It shows up in what you assume before you ask. The department sent out a quiet memo about juvenile interactions a few days later. No names, no incident cited. Just a reminder about cause, consent, and disengagement when no offense is identified. Walker stopped working that beat. People noticed. A parent recognized Davis at the grocery store and asked if it was true. She said, yes, parts of it. Another person said they'd had an issue with Walker months earlier but didn't think reporting it would matter. Now it does, Davis said. Authority met assumption and lost ground not because someone shouted, but because someone wrote things down and refused to let them be blurred. The kids didn't talk about it much after that. Life moved on the way it does when adults handle things. But once, while doing homework, one of them asked, "Why did he think we stole them?" Davis didn't soften it. "Because he decided something about you before he checked." "Is that allowed?" "No," she said. "That's why we challenged it." They nodded, filing it away. Weeks later, a final email arrived. The department had concluded its review. The findings weren't public, but corrective action had been taken. Training required. Conduct noted. No further contact necessary. It wasn't justice the way movies sell it. No dramatic ending. No confession. Just a line drawn where one hadn't been before. Davis archived the emails and backed them up. Documentation doesn't expire. Authority will always walk in confident. Assumption will always follow close behind. But policy exists for the moment they collide, and someone is willing to hold it up and say, "This is where you stop." That day, a badge met a record. Bias met documentation. And, for once, the paper didn't flinch. The first frame freezes on Walker's hand resting near his belt, not moving, just close enough to signal control. The timestamp shows he's already been inside for 3 minutes. No call logged. No report number. The camera catches his voice before it catches anything else. "Whose are those?" he asks, nodding at the tablets. That line doesn't appear in his report. The footage rolls. The kids answer at the same time, then stop and let one speak. Bought by their grandma. For school and games. Receipts at home. Their voices are steady. No laughing. No edge. The camera angle dips when Walker shifts his weight, like he's already decided the direction of the conversation. The report says the kids were evasive. The video shows them answering twice. Walker circles the table once, slow. He asks again where the devices came from. He doesn't ask for a serial number. He doesn't ask staff if anything's missing. He doesn't ask anyone else in the room a single question. The lens catches his breath, getting heavier, his tone sharpening without provocation. The report says a concerned citizen raised an issue. The video has no such moment. At minute 5, a manager steps into frame. Walker tells him there's been a complaint. The manager asks from whom. Walker doesn't answer. He says he needs to check things out. The manager nods, confused but compliant. The camera catches the kids watching this exchange, eyes moving between the adults, waiting. The report says the situation remained unclear. The video shows it clarifying in real time. At minute 7, Walker admits there's no report. He says it plainly. No one called it in. He says it like it's a footnote. The camera records the words. The kids hear it. One of them shifts in his seat and asks if they can go back to eating. Walker doesn't answer that question. The report says the officer remained to ensure public safety. The video shows nothing changing except his posture. Minute 9. Davis steps into frame. She asks why he's still there. Her voice is calm, not raised. She asks what law he's enforcing. The camera angle lifts slightly as Walker turns toward her. His voice tightens. He says he's just doing his job. She asks what that job requires without a report or evidence. The report says a third party interfered. The video shows a citizen asking for clarity. Walker tells Davis to step back. She doesn't. She asks again. He says the kids could be in possession of stolen property. She asks what property report supports that. He doesn't answer. He says she's being disruptive. She says she's being lawful. The camera catches a pause. You can almost see the decision being weighed. Minute 12. Walker glances toward the door. People are watching now. Phones are up. The camera picks up murmurs. No one is yelling. No one is threatening. Just attention. The report says the officer de-escalated. The video shows pressure doing the work. Walker tells the kids they're free to go. He says it like a concession. One of them asks if they did anything wrong. Walker says no. The camera records that too. The kids stand, gather their things, and leave. No rush. No relief in their faces, just confusion. The report says the interaction concluded without incident. The video shows an incident that simply wasn't named. Internal Affairs pauses the footage at that moment. They replay the question about stolen property. They replay the admission of no report. They replay the refusal to disengage. They replay the moment Walker's tone changes before anything else does. They line it up against policy, reasonable suspicion, probable cause, juvenile interaction guidelines. The gaps are obvious. Walker's report uses broad language. The camera uses time and sound. When confronted with the footage, Walker says the camera doesn't capture context. The investigator asks what context is missing. Walker says instinct. He says experience. He says he felt something was off. The investigator asks where that feeling came from. Walker doesn't answer. They ask why he didn't leave once he knew there was no report. He says he wanted to be sure. They ask sure of what? He says he can't always articulate it. The footage keeps playing. It shows Davis asking for names and badge numbers. It shows Walker refusing. It shows him warning her about consequences without stating any. It shows him backing down only after multiple witnesses begin recording. The report doesn't mention witnesses. The footage counts at least 6 phones. When the review ends, the room is quiet. No one argues about what the camera shows. They argue about how to describe it. Words matter. Discipline hinges on phrasing. The facts are locked in. The conclusion doesn't say bias. It says deviation from procedure. It says failure to disengage. It says insufficient cause. Walker signs the acknowledgement. He doesn't admit fault. He doesn't contest the footage. He just signs. Later, Davis watches the video again at home. Not because she needs proof, but because she wants to remember how ordinary it looked. No shouting. No sirens. Just a question that shouldn't have been asked, followed by a refusal to stop. The camera didn't tell a dramatic story. It told a precise one. It showed how easily authority can drift when no one checks it. It showed how quickly a report can rewrite a moment if no one pushes back. And it showed that the truth, when recorded plainly, doesn't need commentary. Footage doesn't take sides. It just stays on. And this time, it stayed on long enough to say what the report didn't. The settlement amount hits the public record on a Tuesday morning, buried between zoning approvals and road repairs. For $1 million. No press conference. No apology attached. Just a line item approved by a majority vote, passed quietly, and moved forward like any other expense. Inside the city attorney's office, no one argues about the number. They argued weeks ago, back when they thought they could explain the footage away. That ended the moment outside counsel finished their review. Too many clear failures. Too many clean timestamps. Too many witnesses whose accounts matched the video frame by frame. They didn't settle because they wanted to. They settled because trial would have been worse. Depositions were already pointing in the wrong direction. Walker couldn't explain why he stayed after confirming there was no report. He couldn't explain why he never asked staff if anything was missing. He couldn't explain why his tone changed before anything else did. When asked what specific behavior triggered suspicion, he gave general answers. When pressed, he said he relied on instinct. Instinct doesn't hold up well under oath. The kids testified by video. Short answers. No dramatics. They described being questioned while eating lunch. They described feeling watched. They described realizing they hadn't done anything wrong, but still being treated like they had. One of them said the hardest part was not knowing when it would end. That line stuck. Experts weighed in. Former officers, policy analysts, civil rights attorneys. They all said the same thing in different words. No reasonable suspicion. No legal basis. No justification for continued detention. One expert pointed out that Walker disengaged only after multiple phones came out. That detail landed hard. The city's insurer ran the numbers. Jury risk, optics, prior settlements, media attention. The recommendation came back fast and clear. Settle now. Davis didn't negotiate from a place of anger. She negotiated from a place of record. Every demand tied back to a documented failure. Every dollar tied to harm that didn't need to happen. She refused clauses that would silence the kids. She refused language that implied mutual fault. The city pushed back once. She didn't budge. When the agreement was finalized, it included mandatory policy review, updated juvenile interaction training, and a written acknowledgement that the stop lacked legal basis. No admission of wrongdoing, but no denial either. That was as far as the city would go. Davis accepted it. She didn't call it justice. She called it accountability. The money was divided carefully. Trusts for the kids. Legal fees capped. The rest earmarked for education and counseling. Nothing flashy. Nothing rushed. Just structure. The same way she handled everything else. Walker was reassigned before the settlement became public. No badge stripped. No public discipline announced. His personnel file reflected corrective action. Inside the department, the message was clear enough. Body cameras don't forget. When the story finally broke, headlines focused on the amount. Comment sections did what they always do. Some said it was excessive. Some said it wasn't enough. Most argued without watching the footage. Davis didn't read any of it. At the next council meeting, she recused herself from the vote. Procedure mattered. She sat in the audience instead, hands folded, listening as colleagues approved the payment. No one looked at her directly. Everyone knew why. Afterward, a reporter asked if she felt conflicted. She said no. She said the city made a mistake and paid for it. That's how systems learn if they're willing to. The kids went back to school. The story followed them for a while, then faded. What stayed was quieter, a sharper awareness, a shorter fuse for authority that couldn't explain itself. They learned early that compliance doesn't always protect you, and that documentation matters. Davis watched that lesson settle in and felt the weight of it. She hadn't wanted this to be how they learned, but she made sure it didn't end in silence. Months later, a training bulletin circulated through the department. It referenced the incident without naming names. It outlined exactly where procedure broke down. It included still frames from the body cam, annotated with timestamps. This is where disengagement should have occurred. This is where questioning crossed the line. This is where public trust eroded. No one mentioned the kids. No one mentioned lunch. But everyone knew. $4 million didn't fix what happened. It didn't rewind the moment or erase the looks in that room. But it changed the cost of repeating it. It made the next officer think twice before relying on a feeling instead of a reason. It reminded the city that authority without limits isn't strength. The reckoning wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It was written into budgets, training manuals, and quiet conversations behind closed doors. And for once, the record reflected what actually happened.